We're today's news talk, The World Today.
Professor Alfred de Zayas is Professor of International Law and at the Geneva School of Diplomacy, a Juris Doctor, Harvard Law School. All the important things of life. Alfred, thank you for joining us. Let's talk about the Gaza peace plan. What's the latest, please, sir?
Well, most of my professor friends, international lawyers, like Professor Richard Falk, who is the president of the Gaza tribunal that has issued a judgment in Sarajevo and then several press releases from Istanbul. We all agree that this is a non-starter. This is so outside international law. The 20-point plan is an ultimatum. It has nothing to do with international law, international morals. It is what the United States and Israel want to do to maintain this colonial state called Israel in a territory that since time immemorial has been peopled by Palestinians. When I say Palestinians, I talk about the Canaanites, I talk about the Hittites of biblical times. And if you're familiar with the Old Testament and how in the book of Joshua, the genocide against the Canaanites is being celebrated, it gives you a lot of food for thought. But let me refer to not a 20-point plan, but a 15-point criticism by a number of prominent international lawyers. I will just read them out to you. Self-determination is made conditional. Now, you know, self-determination is one of the pillars of the United Nations Charter. It is the very essence of the entire decolonization movement. The decolonization process that continues, is not ended. And then number two, there's lack of representative governance in this Trump plan. The oversight is outside the United Nations authority. I mean, we're being sidelined. What is shocking here is that the highest judicial instance that we have in the world is the International Court of Justice. The International Court of Justice issued an advisory opinion on the 9th of July 2004. Again, a second advisory opinion on the 19th of July 2024. Very clear, the Israeli occupation is illegal in international law. They must withdraw from all occupied territories unconditionally, and they must pay compensation to the victims, meaning to the Palestinians and to the Gaza population. Now we're having here an attempt to replace the occupation with foreign control. I find it absolutely obscene that a war criminal like Tony Blair could play any role in this. But we've seen the development over the last 30 years. There has been a retrogression in international law since 1990, 1991, since NATO decided that it was going to control the world. So full spectrum dominance. Now, there was already a revolt against international law when NATO attacked Yugoslavia in 1999 and destroyed Yugoslavia's territorial integrity and tore away Kosovo from Yugoslavia. The narratives and the lies that surround the narratives are so pervasive that sometimes people don't understand when I say that NATO's aggression against Yugoslavia in 1999, wanted to force peace to say nothing about the and the all point number five, the continuous restriction. This is the power the United Nations said that this is genocide. We must, first of all, completely withdraw, allow immediate humanitarian assistance to the suffering population of Gaza and pay compensation. So that is the continuation of the Israeli colonization of Palestine. Things that happened with the Sunni Flotilla and with Greta Thunberg advocating the resources for the entire era. Don't rely only on the resources of the institution for that matter in the New York Times. Another point, penal exploitation without reciprocity. Here you have a demand that Hamas be militarized, but not Israel. I mean, it's putting international law on its head. Unequal de-radicalization measures, fragmentation of the Palestinian territory, uh, economic exploitation, and the risks. I mean, and so-called economic development plan and the creation of a special economic zone could result in foreign exploitation of Gaza's resources, which are substantial, without Palestinian consent. The experts warned that such measures could perpetuate economic dependency rather than support sovereignty. Absence of reparations, of course, unequal treatment of detainees, amnesty without accountability, no accountability for Israeli crimes. I mean, the report of my former boss, the High Commissioner for Human Rights, Navi Pillay, who, by the way, was before she became High Commissioner, she had been a judge in the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda. She knows what he's talking about. She is a professor of law. She is a brilliant woman, and she's committed. And her 72-page report submitted on the 16th of September to the Human Rights Council here in Geneva concluded that Israel has committed genocide. Now, that has consequences. We're not just going to go back to business as usual. We're not going to go back to Israel as a state that deserves the respect of the international community. Israel is a rogue state that has committed genocide, that is committing genocide. Impossible to go back to business as usual. Now, what else also problem with the Trump plan? Omission of fundamental issues. The experts stressed that the plan does not tackle the core issues identified by international law in the various cases that have been presented. You're aware of the South Africa against Israel case that was submitted in 2023. The International Court of Justice issued 5 orders. Israel, of course, ignores the orders of the International Court of Justice. And for that, and that would be sufficient, under Article 6 of the Charter of the United Nations, and I always say that the Charter of the United Nations is the world constitution, and the International Court of Justice is the world constitutional court. The International Court of Justice has said Israel is an illegal occupier, has to leave. Article 6 of the UN Charter says that a country that refuses to abide by the UN Charter can be expelled. And its delegates, you can withdraw their accreditation. And another point that the experts brought out was here the limited UN role, in particular also with regard to the necessary dismantlement of illegal Israeli settlements in the West Bank, the establishment of recognized borders for the state of Palestine. We have 157 states that have recognized Palestine as a state. But how about its borders? I mean, if Israel has continued its land grab, has continued occupying Palestine territory, what are the borders going to be? And of course, the obligation of Israel to allow, I mean, plenty of resolutions of the United Nations General Assembly and Security Council concerning the right to return. By the way, in the 10-volume Encyclopedia of Public International Law, Oxford University Press, 2012, I have the article on forced population transfers and what Israel has done since the Nakba. Is an ethnic cleansing, mass expulsion of the autochthonous population of Palestine. There is in international law a right to return. That has to be taken into account, meaning that millions of Palestinians who are living in camps, etc., outside the borders of Palestine have a right to return. I write about that also in my book, Building a Just World Order, in which I also have a 25 principles of international order that must be respected if we want to have peace in the world and if we don't want to slip into or stumble into the Third World War. Now, this is an interesting book. Professor Virginia Tilley, The One State Solution. If Israel refuses to accept a Palestinian state, well, the alternative is let's have a one state solution in which you bring in, through the right to return, the Palestinians who have been expelled, etc. And suddenly you're going to find out that there is a Palestinian majority in the one state. Now, if it's going to be a member of the United Nations, it has to abide by the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, the Convention Against Torture, the Convention Against Racial Discrimination, the Convention Against Apartheid, etc. So forget this anachronistic idea of a Zionist state only for Jews. I mean, that in itself is so contrary to the entire philosophy of human rights, the philosophy that underpins the United Nations Charter. I must say, Israel is, shall we say, the product of a criminal declaration of 1917 called the Balfour Declaration. And Israel is, shall we say, a colonial experiment. I mean, the Europeans, with their ambition to control the resources of the Middle East, primarily the oil in the Middle East, decided that they were going to have their branch office in Palestine. So the idea was, first of all, wrap it up in the language of a return to the biblical lands, etc., etc. But this is very tough geopolitics. This is very, very tough imperialism, colonialism, in the spirit of the old British Empire. Certainly, Great Britain bears a great responsibility for the tragedy suffered not only by the Palestinians, but by all of Israel's neighbors that have been aggressed again and again by Israel, whether it be Lebanon or Jordan or Syria or Egypt or Iraq and Iran, etc. So we have to think about, as I said, the one state solution. Personally, I would have loved to have seen the plan of I would almost want to call him my friend, but I did know him and I enjoyed when he events. Here I have the book by Jimmy Carter. We can have peace in the Holy Land. Well, indeed, we could have had peace in the Holy Land, but that presupposes good faith. That you are going to abide by international law and that you are a trustworthy partner, which unfortunately the United States is not. Now, going back to the role of the United Nations, I would like to see Antonio Guterres, our Secretary General, finally call a spade and call a genocide a genocide. I would like to see Antonio Guterres urge the General Assembly to adopt a Uniting for Peace resolution. Uniting for Peace resolution would allow governments to take um, individual and joint action against Israel, but at the very minimum. As I said, we cannot go back to business as usual. It is important to completely break commercial relations with Israel and also to break diplomatic relations. And that will hurt economically. And since the United States is complicit in the genocide, I would like to see my country here, Switzerland, where I am also a citizen, I would like to see Switzerland cancel its order for American F-35s. I would like to see the global majority in South America, in Africa, in Asia, refuse to purchase any Boeing product or any product from Lockheed Martin. No more fighter planes, no more F-35s, F-16s, no more passenger planes from Boeing. You can buy very good planes produced in Europe and very good planes produced in China and in Russia. I would like to see no more Caterpillars being purchased by the global majority and say, look, if the United States is going to be a rogue state and is going to support genocide as it has done, because the United States bears, shall we say, the brunt of the responsibility for what has happened, then we're not going to deal with you. We have to start to speak that kind of language. But I speak, of course, here in Geneva with a lot of diplomats, but I also speak with normal people, and they just want to forget about it. They don't want to deal with this like if it's not happening. They don't want to see it. So see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. I mean, the little chimpanzees. It's a situation that worries me a lot because we have tolerated an apartheid state for much too long. And we have lived with the narrative that the Israelis are the good guys and the Palestinians are the bad guys, whereas it's exactly the opposite. I mean, the Palestinians are on their land and on their olive groves, and they have a right to be there. We have no right to establish a European branch office in the Middle East. And uh, it's a disappointment to me, who has, I mean, I've been at the Max Planck Institute for years in Heidelberg. I've been at the university, at the Institute of International Law of the University of Göttingen. And what I find particularly shocking is that the professional organizations of lawyers have not taken in a timely fashion a clear position and saying this is genocide, this cannot be tolerated, this must have consequences. But we see that there are facts without consequences, and we see that there are books without consequences. As I said, the one state solution by Virginia Tilley, it is worth taking a second look at this book. And also Jimmy Carter's book, Palestine, Peace, Not Apartheid. This, really fabulous book was published already in 2006. Little did Jimmy Carter imagine that the situation would reach the level of genocide. Jimmy was a good man with very many good ideas, etc., but the mainstream media more or less buried him. When he dared to use the word apartheid with regard to Israel, he was mobbed in such a disgusting way that it's embarrassing even to remember it. But going back to the Sumud flotilla, I salute all those who had the courage to be on the flotilla. And I want to see the mainstream media finally understand that Israel is acting as an outlaw, has been acting as an outlaw for decades. And when we're talking about terrorism, how about the booby-trapped pagers? Remember last year when thousands of pagers exploded and killed God knows how many civilians. I mean, these are things that you would not believe that a state, a modern state, could possibly do. But Israel does it in total impunity because the United States has put in 60 or so vetoes in the Security Council to shield Israel from the consequences of its crimes. And so that is a breakdown of the system. I write about that in this other book of mine, the human rights industry, how the system has been essentially hijacked, and how many in the Secretariat of the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights actually ideologically support Israel, and those who are opponents are, shall we say, sidelined. To the credit of the United Nations, some 40 colleagues of mine, former, no, not former rapporteurs, actually acting United Nations rapporteurs, issued a press release 4 days ago completely rejecting Trump's so-called 20-point plan, essentially as a farce, as an attempt to circumvent international law and to make the United Nations irrelevant.
Yep. It's just, it's a, some would say, an evolving sphere of stupidity. And I think it's I don't think it's going to work, but I think also that the accountability. No one's really talking about the accountability of some of the people who are responsible for the atrocities in Gaza. Professor Alfred de Zayas, if somebody wanted to find out more about you, besides your books, what about online? What can they do?
Well, I have my website, www.alfreddezayas.com. I also have a blog, which is called the Human Rights Corner, and it is DeZayasAlfredWordPress.com. And I have tweets or X messages every day. And in my more recent ones, I said that enforcement is really the bottom line. It's more important than just standard setting, having norms, etc. We have more norms than we can use. We have no problem. We don't need more treaties. We don't need more declarations. We don't need more protocols. We need enforcement of those protocols. We need enforcement of the judgments and advisory opinions of the International Court of Justice. We also need enforcement of the warrants for the arrest of Yoav Gallant, the former Minister of Defense of Israel, and Benjamin Netanyahu. Part of the problem in today's world is that a major war criminal like Benjamin Netanyahu can be offered a platform in New York at the United Nations General Assembly to spew his hatred against the Palestinians and to justify the unjustifiable. I mean, as long as Israel is a member of the United Nations, and it should not be, well, maybe the head of mission of the Israeli mission in New York could speak on behalf of the government. The head of the mission in New York does not have a warrant for his arrest hanging over his head, but Netanyahu does. And to give immunity to someone who has committed genocide, imagine, roll back your history, go back to 1944, 1945. Imagine that the League of Nations, which had not been abolished yet, the League of Nations was abolished in 1946. Imagine that the League of Nations would have invited Adolf Hitler to come and speak to the assembly. It is surrealistic. And to have this man there receiving all sorts of dignitaries and being treated as a normal head of state, he is not a normal head of state. He is someone who has committed the ultimate crime, which is genocide.
Yep. Look, we do have to leave it, but I would love to continue this, which we will. It's always a pleasure with you, talking with you, Professor. Thank you so much for your time. This is The World Today. Thank you.
For those who crave more than just reading headlines in their social media feeds,
people need to wake up.
We're today's news talk.
And back again, Jobst Landgrebe is a scientist and entrepreneur with a background in philosophy, mathematics, neuroscience, medicine, and biochemistry. Jobst is also the founder of a company called, let me get this right, Cognotekt, a German AI company which since 2013 provided working systems used by companies in areas such as insurance claims management, real estate management, and medical billing. After more than 15 years in the AI industry, Jobst has developed an exceptional understanding of the limits and potential of AI in the future. He's also the co-author of Why Machines Will Never Rule the World, Artificial Intelligence Without Fear by Jobst Landgrebe. and Barry Smith. First of all, Jobst, it's been quite some time. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, thanks for inviting me again, Mike.
It's look, there's an important study at the moment, and the view of some specialist doctors that the COVID-19 shot can be contributing to turbo cancer. What's your thoughts on that?
So this is a case study. I think you're referring to a case study published a couple of weeks ago on genomic integration of material that is contained in the immunization shots into the human genome. And it was only on one patient, but the researchers found that this patient who was 3 times vaccinated with the Moderna shot, this was a woman, she developed a turbo cancer of the urine bladder at young age, which is totally atypical for female patients of this age. She was in her 30s. It's basically unprecedented after the 3 shots. And when they analyzed DNA emanating from the tumor cells, which you can find in the blood, they found that circulating genomic DNA, this is called, they found that it contained an integration of the genetic material used to make the mRNA vaccine. And it cannot be a chance finding, but it must be mean that a piece of the plasmid DNA that is used to make the mRNA the mRNA vaccination was found integrated in the human genome of the tumor cells. And this is a very important finding because some critics of the vaccines have always said that that such integration can happen, which means that you can basically change the genome of the patients. I have always been against this idea, but now it seems that it's actually happening.
So I want to play you this. This is Peter McCullum, a short clip. And Peter is an old friend of TNT Radio and ourselves. I'll play this and I'll get your thoughts on what he's saying.
Now's the time to be vigilant on all cancers, and some are advancing more rapidly, more frequently, and more deadly, and includes the most common cancer in women, which is breast, and the most common in prostate. That's been released on Focal Points, the most recent U.S. cancer statistics. So cancer is on the rise in those categories. We don't know if it's acute COVID-19 infection. There was a paper written that maybe the infection alone would stimulate bladder cancer, like what Deion Sanders has, or in fact, if it was the vaccines. Now, more and more papers now are physically locating the vaccine and the spike protein, Steve, in the tumor itself. So it's right there at the scene of the crime. Gene expression is dramatically changed after someone takes a vaccine and develops cancer. So it's looking like it's the vaccines, and we need to be vigilant and move fast.
So there's Peter McCullum, who's always at the forefront. What do you think about what he's saying?
So he's a co-author of the paper I just quoted, of this case study, and I believe that that he is right. I don't think that the hypothesis that the infection with SARS-CoV-2 can cause cancer. I think this is there's zero evidence for this. I think the case is the extreme rise in cancer and turbo cancer, which is, by the way, a very rapidly evolving cancer that is atypical for the age groups affected. Is caused by or co-caused by the vaccination schemes. And the way it happens is not primarily via genomic integration. I think that that's not the primary mechanism, but the primary mechanism is the suppression of the immune system after these vaccinations. So I believe that these patients acquire a type of immune deficiency syndrome, and that this is basically this is basically causing the surge in cancer that we see, mainly because the immune system is not capable anymore to identify cancer cells and destroy them in time.
Can you explain the process that might explain how, one, the shots alters the cells in the body, and two, creates spike protein to counteract the virus it was intended to kill?
Yeah, so basically with the mRNA shots, you have a lipid nanoparticle shell, which these are lipid particles, and they inside them you find mRNA, which was made artificially in the laboratory, that contains also a nucleic acid that is not occurring in the body, pseudouridine. And this pseudouridine is then part of the mRNA. But in these particles, you also find fragments of the plasmid that is used to drive the in vitro synthesis of the mRNA. Not the entire plasmid, but fragments of it that remain there because of the process of tidying up. The entire reaction is not carried out properly to save cost, so that basically you get into this lipid nanoparticle shell also not only mRNA but also plasmid DNA fragments. These are again fragments of the production process. It's like an untidy reaction remnant in the shell. Now, if you inject these particles, two things happen. First of all, they get into the blood circulation sooner or later. If you inject into a vein, they get there immediately. If you inject into the muscle, as it should be done, they get there. Takes a little longer, but they will also get into the blood system. And then they will spread all over the body and being taken up by cells, primarily endothelial cells, but also other cells, parenchymatic cells, and these cells will now start to produce a spike protein because the mRNA encodes it. So this is one effect. The other effect is that since there's also plasmid DNA remnants, pieces of DNA in there, there's also a chance, which is what I thought wouldn't happen, but what seems to happen, that some of the cells also integrate these fragments into the genome. So what is the consequence of this? So the production of spike protein by the cells leads to the immune system killing off these cells, which means that if the cells have integrated genomic DNA into their genome, then that doesn't matter so much because the cells get killed anyway. That's why I disagree with Sucharit Bhakti, who says that we are creating genetically modified organisms with the vaccinations. No, we are not, because most cells or all the cells, almost all the cells that get transfected with the lipid nanoparticles get killed by the immune system, which is the main cause of side effects of this treatment. But if you have a cancer cell that is already existent and that gets also transfected, it will be able to integrate this into its genome, this piece of plasmid that is as a remnant of the production process present in the lipid nanoparticle, and this will lead. The problem is that these cells are often not recognized by the immune system anymore. So this integration can happen, and it could, if the integration happens in a place that causes genomic instability, could increase the aggressiveness of the tumor. This is a theory brought forward by Peter McCullough and colleagues in this case study, is that basically we may have in the cancer cells that get transformed in this way an acceleration of their growth and an increase of their aggressiveness. As to back to the normal cells, the healthy cells that integrate this, some of them might be turned to cancer cells as well, but this is rather unlikely. I believe the main effect comes from transforming existing cancer cells to make them more malign, or from deterioration of the function of the immune system, of which we don't know the mechanism fully. It might have several reasons, might have to do with the toxicity of the spike protein as well.
Is there something in the manufacturing process that was not foreseen? What was that?
So it's actually foreseen. So let me explain the manufacturing process. So you take a piece of circular DNA, which is called a plasmid, and you basically, this plasmid encodes for the mRNA that you want to produce. Then you take a DNA-dependent RNA polymerase, which is an enzyme that can read the circular DNA sequence and synthesize the desired mRNA based on the directions given on the plasmid. And you add the nucleotides, which are the basic elements of the RNA, to the mix and let the reaction run. And once the reaction is finished, you have to, of course, destroy the template from which the polymerase was reading to create the modified RNA. And this is done with DNAs. And I always thought, okay, this is sufficient to tidy up the reaction, but actually what they do is they cut this plasmid DNA into small pieces, but they did not utilize sufficient filtration steps to separate the debris of the DNA from the mRNA. so that they only package the mRNA into the lipid nanoparticles. What they do instead is that they keep this mixture of digested plasmid DNA, which are now smaller chunks of DNA, mixed together with the RNA and package this into the lipid nanoparticles. And this mixture is then injected in the end into the patient. So it's actually an insufficient manufacturing process that leads to the creation of lipid nanoparticles which contains DNA, which they should not contain.
It's interesting. I was just looking at some stuff before that they say some are quoting an increase of 8,300%, which that's been knocked on the head by other medical authorities, but it's an 8,300% increase in colon cancer. And to take away that number, there is an increase in colon cancer. As an example, are the medical authorities, are they doing their job? That's the best way to put this. Are they doing the job, and are they taking this seriously, or are they sort of, being what they have been in the past?
I think that the medical authorities are partially doing their job. So it depends where you look. There are areas where they are very careful in doing their job properly, and there are other areas that have become politicized and where we have what is called regulatory capture. And in these areas, they don't properly do their job anymore, which is to basically carefully evaluate the benefit-risk ratio of each drug. Normally, you can only approve drugs and keep the marketing authorization active for drugs that have a very favorable risk-benefit profile, given the basic condition of the patient. So if a patient is very, very sick, if you're on an intensive care unit about to die and you receive vancomycin, you are willing to accept, and it saves your life, it's an antibiotic, and you are willing to accept that it might make you deaf. Because being deaf afterwards but saved is still better than having died. So the side effect that is acceptable depends on the seriousness of the condition in which the drug is treated. But with vaccines, we have the situation that we are giving this drug to healthy people. And so if you give a drug to a healthy person, it must have no side effects, right? If the purpose is to prevent a disease, first of all, the drug should be able to perform this. It should indeed prevent the disease, and then it should do it without any side effects, or with extremely rare side effects. So with traditional vaccines, we've been willing to accept one death in 5 million vaccinated, with measles, for example, or rubiola. And I think this is a ratio that is acceptable because if you get infected by these diseases without prior vaccination, you have a much higher chance to die. And so if you basically take this as an acceptable ratio, then every vaccine that is given to a healthy patient or healthy person should only be given if this ratio is achieved and there's a vaccination success. But the SARS-CoV-2 vaccines have no protective effect at all, and they do enormous harm. So the medical authorities are failing because they are failing to apply the rules that I just described, and they should take away the marketing authorization of these drugs immediately.
Has the whole medical fraternity for example, we're talking about turbo cancers and we're talking about all sorts of ideas. What I see just sitting here is that, for example, if Donald Trump says one thing, you have an automatic reaction from a great chunk of the medical fraternity and government saying that the guy's an idiot. So therefore, regardless of whatever he says or whatever is said, it's treated automatically like a conspiracy theory. So has the decision making and the betterment for society become politicized, depending on which side of the fence you sit?
Well, I mean, regarding medical issues, it's not so important what Donald Trump says because he doesn't understand this, and obviously as a politician, he's not capable of making up his own mind in a clear way and then sticking to one type of proposition. He's all the time contradicting himself. So I think what really matters is what the overall Western political establishment as a whole says. And the overall Western political establishment so far has not moved away from supporting the nucleic acid-based vaccination schemes. Neither has the Trump government, nor the French government, nor the German, nor the English government. So everywhere in the Western world, we see an ongoing support for nucleic acid-based vaccination schemes, although we now know medically that they are toxic and don't protect against anything. They actually probably make it even more likely that you get a SARS-CoV-2 infection, or for that matter, any kind of infection, because your immune system gets weakened by these vaccinations. So my view is that the political class is not willing to accept that this type of vaccination should be abolished. And within the medical authorities, I think those people who think that this should be done are silenced. And so, yes, this part of the legislation or the executive branch's behavior with regard to these toxic schemes is actually heavily politicized and also, I think, post-democratic. Because in a democratic society, competent authorities of the executive branch should, of course, protect the public.
Tell me, how do we get to this stage? Because at the moment, what is suffering is, well, I suppose, knowledge or common sense, or the respect for a profession such as science. It seems to be in this, I mean, it's like, you would probably describe it as chaos, wouldn't you?
No, I think chaos is too positive as a term, because chaos would mean really an unordered process. But this is a very ordered process. It's an ordered process to actually impose on the population toxic drugs. And I think this is not chaos, but this is unfortunately a process that has a goal. Now, how did we get there? We got there very slow. Remember the thalidomide scandal of the 60s, right? So German drug maker called Grünenthal made thalidomide, and it created these terrible birth defects with the short arms, short limb disease in children whose mothers took this drug during the pregnancy. And when this came out, there was a huge reformation of pharmacovigilance, which is a science of protecting the public from the danger of toxic drugs and from monitoring drugs for their toxicity. And then for several decades, we had a very good culture of making sure that we avoid mass prescriptions of toxic drugs and market authorization of toxic drugs. Of course, the pharma industry always tried to kind of cheat a bit and get drugs market authorized that still has the toxic side effects. But when they were discovered later, usually the indication was confined, or either the drugs were taken off the market. And we've seen entire classes of drugs vanish from the market because of their toxicity, like, for example, certain antiarrhythmic drugs for heart disease. So I believe that the process worked for a while, but then the pharmaceutical industry became under massive profitability pressure because there was less innovation that was mass relevant. So mass relevant innovation is innovation in the pharmaceutical industry that creates drugs that help millions of people, like penicillin did, or many other drugs that were invented after World War II until the 1980s. But since the 1980s, we had a crisis, and less innovation that was mass relevant came through. There is still innovation in the last 40 years, but it's more and more innovation for small groups, but there's less innovation for the masses. But this is the innovation that made the pharma industry rich. So to counter this crisis, the pharma industry created drugs for mass prescription that were either not so functional, that didn't have such a strong effect, or were toxic, and managed somehow to get through with this. And via a slow process that Robert Kennedy Jr. called regulatory capture, they managed to influence the authorities, the competent authorities, to actually approve these drugs and maintain them on the market despite the toxicity. And now we live in a situation where I think that roughly half of the prescription volume has no positive effects for the patients, or is toxic. So it's a very bad situation with a huge set of drugs that is now being regularly prescribed that fail to deliver any benefits for the patients.
How do we, I'm going to go over time here if you don't mind just a little bit, how does the industry, or how does a medical professional, government, whatever you want to call it, get back its trust and credibility?
So I think we would have to start to identify all the drugs and also pseudo vaccines that don't do their job, that don't have a positive benefit risk ratio, and remove their marketing authorization. If we do that, some pharmaceutical companies would go bust. Well, then they should, because it's not useful for us to have big companies which make profit from toxic or useless drugs. remember the opioid crisis, right? So where basically Purdue Pharma made billions and billions based on drugs that should never have been obtained marketing authorization, or not at least not for the indications that they received. And we should basically remove all these drugs from the marketing authorization, or massively constrain their indications and reduce their indications. And then we should abolish the nucleic acid-based vaccinations, and we should make a public campaign about this, and then the individual doctors would learn that the new prescription pattern of drugs, and then the trust would come back.
Absolutely fascinating. I've had a magnificent last hour with Professor de Zayas and then yourself. Truly, it's magnificent. Thank you, Jobst. If somebody wants to find out more about what you do, or do some readings on you, or just support you, how do they do that?
I don't need to be supported. I just need, but you can Google my name and then you find all my publications.
That's right, next to Brad Pitt. Thank you very much. Always a pleasure. It's been a fantastic last hour. I had some just magnificent guests. I thank them very, very much too. By the way, thank you for watching us. We had a couple of little technical issues. Someone referred to that we had someone on talking away, and next minute the Dalek was there. And yes, we did. We will destroy, and they almost did that too. Thank you very much for your time. This is The World Today.